with a special guest, Max Aita. Max is a weightlifting and powerlifting coach and an athlete.
And so we dug the basement out by hand and like 5-gallon buckets, and we would work for like 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day. Then I would go max out at night.
Perfect training.
Everyone just wants to glorify the simplest solution because it's so easy to buy in. It's so easy to sell it to somebody that like, no, you want to get better at snatching, just snatch.
Ok, živijo, lepo pozdravljeni v 8. epizodi PTS Fitness podcasta. Ta podcast bo cel v angleščini z gostom Maxom, tako da, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are doing the 8th episode of the PTS Fitness podcast with a special guest, Max Aita. I'll do a quick introduction and then he can tell you more about himself. So, Max is a weightlifting and powerlifting coach and an athlete not so more, but he used to lift, believe it or not. Some of his best numbers are 140 kilo snatch, 175 kilo clean and jerk, 185 kilo clean, right?
Yeah.
And in powerlifting, he did 335 kilo squat, 160 kilo bench, 320 kilo deadlift. He's been coaching for more than a decade, and some of his biggest coaching accomplishments include American record holders, Pan Am record holders, world record holders in powerlifting, as well as world champions in both powerlifting and weightlifting. And he has a lot of success with masters lifters. So I think I got at least some of your resume.
Sure.
Thank you for coming on, and you can tell us a bit more about yourself.
Yeah, I won't correct anything if there's anything wrong, as long as it's in my favor.
Right,
So that's
right.
pretty good.
No one knows.
Yeah, that summarizes it pretty well. I think I had a lot of experience training under some other coaches as well.
Mm-hmm.
I spent time under Abajev, Bulgarian national coach.
Right.
A dozen other top American coaches, Borshiko, powerlifting. So yeah.
Which coaches you spend the most time under?
My first coach was Steve Goff.
Okay.
He was basically the American version of Abajev.
Right.
Yeah. He was an ex-Marine. And I guess you're never an ex-Marine. Once you're a Marine, you're always a Marine.
Of course.
So he was a Marine, but he was like, if you've ever seen Rocky, which probably is a little old for some of the people listening, the original Rocky, his coach, Burgess Meredith, the actor, played him.
Okay.
This old gray-haired dude who was just like nasty and mean, and every single thing he said would get him, today would be, like a safe silly shot. Yeah. Like really bad stuff. But yeah, he was the guy I spent the most time with. I trained with him I talked to him on the phone every day before training for 6 years. And then I would go drive there and train with him. But I stayed in touch with him, up until he passed away.
Nice.
So he was my first coach and longest coach.
Okay. Yeah, so you really got the full spectrum of like the coaches who are just go ham and train to everyone like Boris Sheikh, who was very much into the science and the details.
Yeah. Super, super big spectrum of everybody's like different approaches to training.
Nice. And you got into lifting when? What year?
So the story of how I got into lifting, when I was a little kid, I always wanted to be really strong. It was like really important to me. And I remember like I had a friend's father tell me a story once when I was like a teenager, and he asked me like when I was like 6 years old, like, how come you're not playing like football with the other kids? And I said, I don't have time for that. I'm going to be the strongest man in the world.
Okay.
That didn't happen, but
but you gave your best.
Yeah, I tried as hard as I could.
Yeah.
When I was like 12 years old, though, I saw the 96 Olympics on TV, and there was a little 30-second or like maybe 10-second clip of Naeem Suleimanoglu winning his third gold medal. And it was like that moment I saw that, it was just burned into my brain that I was going to be a weightlifter.
Right.
And I just went from there.
Do you have like having so many different training approaches? Did any approach like become your favorite? Let's say, did you enjoy training the most under like specific training approach?
Enjoy squatting every day for 13 years.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's a good question, because like my training as an athlete, like there's certainly like some training is more fun. I mean, maxing out all the time is more fun when it's going well.
Which is not for long.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's like a weird balance. Like training like the Bulgarians is a lot of fun when you have a great environment, good energy, good training partners, and things are going well. And that's like super exciting. On the other side of that coin, like training with like the Russian system, the Soviet system is really enjoyable. Like it feels great. Almost every session is really solid and feels good, and you're making progress and like
making lifts.
Yeah, and it feels like this is the way that I want to train.
It's like it's sustainable long term.
Yeah. The difference is that like on Friday when your buddies are maxing out their snatch and you have like 6 triples of hang snatch below the knee, it's like not the same. Or you're doing endless triples in the squat. Like it's just a different kind of thing. So different times, different systems were more fun or less fun. But I would say like overall, the evolution went from like what's fun and feels great to and like is exciting to what works. Because at some point you kind of get tired of like it's fun, but it's not getting better.
Nothing is as exciting as making progress.
Yeah,
that's what you usually get to.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Max and his wife Joanne are here in Slovenia because me and Matic overhyped it for for a few years. Max is a former coach of mine, and we met multiple times at international competitions. And they basically decided to come here for a vacation. We did a seminar in our gym 2 days ago, which went, I think, really well. We can cover a little bit of that later on. What do you generally think of Slovenia? Do you like it?
Yeah,
I've been here for a few days.
The place is great. It's super pretty.
If you say anything bad, we'll lose all the viewership on this.
Yeah, no, it's a great place. Wonderful people. Sans the 3 folks at the table here. I mean, it's awesome. It's beyond my expectation.
Nice.
Yesterday went to Lake Bled.
Yeah.
And it was really cool. And like, not from the touristy aspect, it was just really pretty. Like you go, there's a castle, like it's kind of what you think it's going to be, but then when you actually get there and the experience is like better than you could hope for. So that was cool. And just like the general vibe everywhere seems very friendly. It's a nice place. It's, so far everything we've done has been great. The food's been really good too.
Yeah, and the food's been
so that's been cool.
What would you say the general like? Do most people like in America, even if you mention Slovenia, do they even know like where it is?
I think a lot of people mistake it for Slovakia. Yeah,
that's very often even in the international competitions.
Oh yeah,
we've so many times been called Slovakia.
Yeah.
And they announce it, it's from Slovakia.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I think most people are just not aware of it, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Maybe for us, like, to go to a place where it's not like going to be super overrun with a bunch of foreign tourists.
Exactly. Yeah. Cause that's what we were talking about. Like he said the Lake Blade and some of the nature here does remind him a little bit of like some parks in America or in Canada, but it's just like overrun with tourists everywhere. Whereas here it's not as bad.
Yeah. Although, to be fair, like the weather, wasn't the best. Although I liked it the most, like if it was hotter, it would be
worse.
Yeah.
But
we got lucky that even though there was like loads of cars and tourists, it didn't show as much in Bled actually.
Yeah.
Just because of that.
Like at the most popular viewpoint, there were quite a few spots where you could just get coffee.
Yeah, because like Bled is known as the most touristy place in Slovenia.
Yeah.
And to experience the most touristy place is what it was yesterday.
Yeah.
You got really lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like people. Yeah, it's funny to see though in the winter, like the Bled is empty. I've been there in like October, I think, and it's just a dead city.
It's funny because it's like a really pretty place. I mean, either winter or summer, I imagine, is like
there's no life in it.
Yeah, there's not much to do. Obviously,
right? Yeah, most places like closed down or just like half open.
Yeah. It also feels like a place where everyone is outdoors. There's a lot of cycling. There's a lot of people like active outside, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's something we don't even like. I've never thought of like that. It's not like that everywhere else.
Yeah,
it's so natural. Like he said, there's no like in America you have just mostly the streets are very very like well organized, but there's no places to just go outside the house and hang out. Well, no, a lot less than here. In the city center, the whole center is like alive. It's a walking zone, and it's just things to do, things to go and go eat.
Zero said yesterday, like people just hang out at home or just be at home, like not hang out at all. which is like
parking lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
California.
The drugs around the corner.
Yeah, California is very much like get in your car, drive to a shopping center, like
Window busted in.
yeah, lose something in your car, and then basically go back home. There's not as much of that. I mean, there is some obviously, but like there's not as much of that like European walking area where like regular like residents will be.
Right.
The big touristy areas are like shopping malls.
Right. What you think of the seminar? How it went?
Although it was good, it's always hard to judge those because you're not on the receiving end of it. From my perspective, I always feel like I don't get enough of the information out to be useful to people. Like I'll try to explain some kind of training or like the more detailed you go, the longer it would take.
Right. And then more and more people lose focus. It's an impossible task.
Yeah.
You can't get it perfectly right.
And then you'll do things where you go, like, to me, you need to have a prerequisite of understanding some concepts before you can explain the more detailed part.
Right. And most people did, which is nice.
Yeah. And so it's like, I'm always struggling between like, do we explain this from the base and then go from there? But that would just take so long.
Mm.
And then if you go from the top down, you might gloss over things that are understood that are, difficult to get across. So
right.
I always feel like I could do a better job of that. I always feel like it could be a little bit more, maybe like specific to certain things, but it's hard to know. Yeah, like you said though, I think like if somebody gets something out of it they can apply in the next week, that's perfect.
Which they will for sure did.
It was funny to me when you said that you were doing a seminar. I'm not sure, was it in British Columbia? And that you were just like talking about volume or something for 60 to 90 minutes. And then somebody at the end was just like, so what's this volume? So it's hard to, I think it's just hard to strike a balance. To strike a balance with when you have so many people. And even like we send out a questionnaire, like, okay, what's your experience level? To see what people want really. And we've had many people who were like pretty experienced, which helped a lot because I feel like those beginner seminars would be just a bit too boring. Right. And you can't combine the beginner and the advanced because it's not gonna make sense either to the beginner. It's not gonna make sense to the advanced. It's not gonna be like, okay, why am I here?
Yeah, it's like a strange duality. The simple stuff for like a beginner class, you think you can just gloss over things because they make sense to you because you live in a bubble, right?
Yeah.
But to them, like you get that situation, like what is volume after 90 minutes of speaking about volume, right? And then obviously the detail stuff, well, it's in the name, right? You can't gloss over details because that wouldn't make sense. So I think you did a really good job, especially for the time that you had available.
Yeah.
But it has to be objective, like as a speaker, because you think like, I could have done this, I could have done that, but at the end of the day,
I think it was great as well. I think like the time management and the time we had, it was a great span. It was just tough because we had two groups. And so some people had just the powerlifting, some people had just the weightlifting, and then there was like a super total. Some people did both. And the ones who joined later on the powerlifting, like they didn't hear everything from the weightlifting side, which I think would be useful for them as well.
Right.
Yeah,
it's hard.
But then you can, but you can just do two same seminars, lectures, and just kind of add something, which is a bit like 20 minutes of specificity for the weightlifting or powerlifting. You have to like keep the value up for the super total as well.
Yeah, I think if I was gonna I think my inclination now is to move towards breaking the educational stuff up into different categories. So like a beginner, like learn how to lift kind of course that's like just focus on that. And then like for intermediate lifters, like a training camp where you have 3 or 4 days with a coach, but shorter days.
Right.
And then like the final thing would be like for coaches where more educational content. And that could
it's more of theory, a bit maybe less practice.
Yeah. You can even have some of that like distributed before the actual seminar. Yeah. So you can watch videos and get some concepts down and then have a discussion about it.
Like it's a whole project, a whole different project.
It's totally.
This makes sense. It's just, it's hard when in places like this where you can get like 100 slots filled up.
Yeah.
You kind of have to bunch everything together. And like for us, this was the first like real seminar. We did a lecture in the past, but this was like a first big one. And I thought it was great. I took a ton from it, from both the theoretical lectures and the practical part a little bit. And the feedback we received was great as well. So I think, yeah. And also, I think we managed to fill up like 25-ish slots, maybe just under that out of 40, which obviously and that turned out great because it was, I think, just the right amount.
Yeah.
And I also, like I said to you, I don't think there's been a bigger strength training seminar in Slovenia ever.
Like, when you catch me next time, just put that
right,
largest education provider in Slovenia for strength training.
That would go down well, yeah. So yeah, great experience. Really glad we got to do it.
Nice.
Okay, let's move on to a little bit of your background. I think that'd be really interesting for people. That's kind of where we know you from. We started watching you, even the old cal strength videos, and then later on the Juggernaut. So if you don't mind, just kind of painting a picture of like what the cal strength days were, who you trained with, and kind of what the vibe was like.
Cal strength was interesting. So it started. David Spitz started cal strength 2008 after he had brought Ivan Abajev to the U.S. to sort of prepare him for the Olympics.
Okay.
Abajev brought...
So if he wanted to compete himself.
Yeah. Dave was trying to compete as a weightlifter in the Olympics. He brought Abajev out to sort of coach him, and he brought 2 lifters with him.
Mm-hmm.
And those 2 lifters were Martin Pashov, whose father was a bronze medalist in the Olympics, and then Nikolai Kristov, who was a super.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys in Bulgaria had both done pretty good numbers. Martin did 185, 215 as a 94.
Okay.
And Nikolai had done like 205, 250.
Mm-hmm.
So they were, competent lifters for sure. They came out, and Dave was basically going to open it up to people to train.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually kind of a funny story because he opened it up. They put a website up. They did all this stuff, and they got 3 emails of people that wanted to come and do it and train with them.
So that was like how long of what were you signing up for? Like a half a year?
You had to pay $1,000 a month to go there, train, or you could train as long as you wanted, as long as your money was good.
Okay.
Immediately after they had posted this, the IWF sent a memo out saying that anybody who trained with Abajev would be banned for life.
Why is that?
Because he was banned. He was banned for life after 2000. So the Bulgarians have a sordid past with weightlifting. They were kicked out of the 1988 Olympics after a bunch of drug positives.
Okay.
They came back. I believe they were kicked out again in 2000. They may have been kicked out another time, maybe 96.
Okay.
But just prolific drug positive.
Yeah.
In my understanding, it was much more of a personal vendetta between Ion and Abajev.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the reality was everyone was dope.
The reality is everyone was getting caught. It's like who was paying. So to preface this, for those that don't understand, like the Bulgarian, like sort of the legend in weightlifting, there was an era where the Bulgarians were like dominant over everybody, and it was going to culminate at the 1988 Olympics, where Abajev had basically planned, this is from him, he told us this, that he had planned to win every medal. Okay. He knew he was going to win. Naim was a Turkish lifter, but he would have counted that in his mind as a Bulgarian.
Right.
And he was basically thinking he was going to try to win every gold medal in all the classes. He tells the story that they came to him and said, you can get 3. If you get 3, that's fine, but don't try to do all of them.
Right.
If you do, you're done.
That was the IWF leadership.
Yeah. And so they basically he went and, started this. They were like, fuck, this isn't going to happen. So they just, they got him. He would tell stories about the Russians having a secret, naval ship offshore where they were doing their testing. There was a whole bunch of crazy stories like this, stories about the Russians coming to him and be like, hey, we're killing our athletes, giving them all too many drugs. Let's stop. And he's like, okay. And so they stop. And then the next meet, David Riggert sets a world record and he's, oh, fuck this. So, because how much of this is true or not, or just stories or embellished, it's impossible to know. But basically his thing was they were going to win. They were going to do all this. They had this sordid past. So basically he's been kicked out so many times that he was banned. And Ion was like, anyone who trains with him is banned. The 3 people that I was told that emailed were myself that communicated. Maybe there was more, but
how do you find out about it?
One of my coaches was friends with one of the guys who was helping Dave.
Okay.
And so he communicated, hey, can you let this kid in? He's been training like this. He would train hard. The other was a Canadian woman who went on to do really well. She didn't go though.
Okay.
And then the third was supposedly Ilya. And
Okay.
he wanted to come. His coach and
You wanted to come from Kazakhstan?
yeah, his coach Enver Turkalaria was like a huge disciple of Abajev. And so like this whole thing, but that didn't end up happening, obviously.
Oh, damn. Too bad. Maybe
Yeah.
you could have been a real good weightlifter.
Yeah. And, you know, this is what I was told. So, you know, always take this with a grain of salt if it's true or not. But yeah, so I went there and it was just me. And I ended up working to make money to go there. I ended up like renovating a basement. So in my hometown, there was, you know, a friend of mine who was working on some guy's basement. It was a 6 foot tall basement. And normally you want like 8 feet tall to have more of a livable space. And so we dug the basement out by hand and like 5-gallon buckets, and we would work for like 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day. Then I would go max out at night.
Perfect training environment.
It was actually less training than I was doing before though. So it was like, I was tired. I wasn't lifting well, but you know, I was able to do it.
Right.
Took that money, went there, and, you know, I was ready to just pay and train as long as I could and do whatever he said. And you know, like 2 500 pill bottles of ibuprofen later, I was like, you know, I was broke.
Maybe this was such a good idea.
My shoulders were just so fucked up from lifting with poor technique for years before. And, you know, ultimately like doing no general training. So I didn't have a lot of muscle mass in my upper body. My legs were super strong. My back was not as strong as it should have been. And it just made my technique rough. You know, I was fast, but not powerful. And so like speed with no power is kind of useless. You know, I was strong in the wrong areas.
Right.
So yeah.
Can you tell the conversation you had with Abajev about why his system was not performing in the US?
Yeah, I mean, we sat.
That's a really sad story. I was expecting it to be funny, but
no, I talked to him many times, you know, just he and I was really curious. I'd ask him a lot of questions about old lifters because he responded well to that. He liked hearing about that because I knew all the lifters. And I would ask him who did what numbers and all this. But, you know, one day after training, I was sitting in there in the morning with him, and everybody was like just broken. Like nobody was doing anything. And he was like, he looked at me, he's like, I don't know why I'm here. Like, I don't, like, what am I doing? Like, my system doesn't work without pills. And there's, you know, showing me, I was like, well, okay, that's, I guess that makes sense. Like, that answers that question. There was a big thing.
Guys are so broken there.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big thing for me, was like trying to understand, like, because you know, you grow up in this stuff doing it, and you're like, you know, you think there's some secret or some book or something, like, what am I not doing? And everyone just wants to glorify the simplest solution because it's so easy to buy in. It's so easy to sell it to somebody that, like, no, if you want to get better at snatching, just snatch. And like, if you want to get better at clean, right? Yeah. Well, so like, even that, to that degree, like, you know, it's like you look at some different schools of training and like, there's better lifters, you know? We've heard many things. You hear many things from different people from different systems, right? Some Russian lifters will say like, yeah, the Bulgarian system works well if you're not going to get tested at the meet, but the Russian system works better if you are going to get tested. Right? It's like a different world, right? Those guys just live in a different world. At the time they did.
Yeah. It's changed a lot since then.
Yeah, it's very different now.
Okay, so that lasted for a few months?
That was, probably over maybe like 6 to 8 months or something like that, okay. 6 months. And then I left, I went back home, and then Dave started Cal Strength, and he was like, hey, you know, can you come out and help me? And I went out there and I was kind of coaching and helping. We had no idea what to do.
Right.
We know what we were doing.
Did you just get the lifters off the street, or where'd you get?
I mean, it was mostly going to be like training for like huge athletes and that stuff.
Trying to build up.
Yeah. And, you know, to Dave's credit, like he didn't know what he was doing. And he was like paying 3 full-time weightlifters to coach. And like that thought was really, well, it was just stupid. Like, like they're not bringing anyone in the door.
Yeah.
He hustled a lot. You know, and then eventually like more people came, and like Glenn Penlay came out at some point, and Glenn was really the catalyst that drove the success of Cal Strength early on, because he was kind of one of the first people to like broadcast weightlifting training and stuff on the internet. Not that people had filmed it and showed it before, but this was like showing real people doing real lifting, you know, that weren't the superstars of
through YouTube and articles.
Yeah, it was through YouTube mostly and streaming. There was a lot of like you could do like live streams. I don't remember what websites it would be through.
Okay.
Probably some offshoot of like Pornhub, but like there was it wasn't like, I don't think it was YouTube at the time because they didn't have a live streaming option.
Okay.
But he would put that up, and then he started putting stuff on YouTube.
Okay.
And people would watch it, and like obviously people, I ran into people today that like watch that. Day
still.
one.
Oh yeah. And people still watch that like before training. That's good.
And it was fun. I mean, I would not put Glenn in the category of being an extraordinary coach.
Mm-hmm.
He was at the time one of the more like thoughtful coaches, which when
because then was none of the science and none of the nothing.
Yeah, I think the depth of knowledge was not there before. And so you look at Glenn's programs and it was like, the Texas Method Squat program year round.
Yeah.
And like go as heavy as you can on a few different variations of snatch and flanger, like every session.
Yeah.
And
which is like, you can see it's a small step up from what you were doing before.
All
the
time.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
it was going in the right direction, just
bar was so much slower.
Yeah. It just there wasn't as much thoughtfulness about training back then.
Right.
And so I was like, that drove a whole bunch of it, but I was in there in the mix. I never actually got coached by Glenn.
Mm-hmm.
I had hurt my wrist. I jammed my wrist and dislocated my lunate bone.
Right.
And was unable to do any more snatching or clean and jerking. So I just started squatting, and I was like, well, this is what I know, so I'll just squat all the time. Abijayev, at one point, I tweaked my elbow during one session, so he just had me squat 8 times a day. And so I was like, well, and I went my front squat.
How do you survive that? Like, how do you...
Yeah, I mean, like, this is the thing that's funny, right? Like, people think of those programs as being, like, really hard to survive.
Yeah.
You would get chewed up much, much faster with volume. Like, I never had a soft tissue injury until I started training with a bunch of volume. Right, I did powerlifting.
Yeah, because it's like you go in there, you work up to a top single, and then you go home.
Yeah.
No volume, no accessories.
8 times a day?
Yeah, I would squat 8 times a day with Abijayev. Even with golf, I would squat. So golf was insane. Golf would have us come in and like, it was like, oh, let's train morning and night. Okay. So we'd go kind of light in the morning, heavy at night. And then his nature was just to like, if it looks good, let's push it and go heavier. But the way he would describe it is like strike while the iron's hot. Right.
That makes sense.
And then, but then, yeah, well, sure. Right. Yeah. Well, but then like, well, it's lukewarm. That's still close to so it's like, hey, if you keep hitting it, it's getting hotter. Yeah. And that was his mentality, was like, so every session turned into, it would start as like morning sessions were like powers and like a light squat. And by the end of training with golf before I left, it was like front squat to maximum, snatch, front squat to maximum, clean and jerk, front squat to maximum, eat lunch at his house, watch weightlifting videos, come back at night and do the same thing.
Oh, that's an insane environment.
Yeah, and it was just me and him, and it was so concentrated. It was brutal. It was like, like putting yourself in this place of like getting tortured. We had another guy come out. What's that?
For how long was that?
2 years? Years, like 6 years.
Where did this real need to get as strong as possible come from?
I don't know. I mean, I think it was just like I always was super into it.
Okay.
I was always like, I just wanted to be strong,
because you're not from that environment. Like your parents have nothing to do with it. You don't have any like.
My parents never trained or anything or even worked out. Like my dad plays golf and my siblings don't. And it was just like one of those things where it was like, I think like a lot of weightlifters, you just see it and then you like fall in love instantly. And like,
it looks so cool.
Yeah. You just can't stop. It's like, it's such a rewarding thing to do. Like in the
Yeah. And it's like you get the reward and then it takes you longer to get it.
I was just in Yerevan for the Europeans doing commentary, and Seb and I would do commentary for hours every night. And I wake up the next morning and I'd go on YouTube and watch like 1980s weightlifting meets. And I was like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like, why am I watching this? Like, I'm sitting here involved in weightlifting all day and I'm still watching more of it.
After like 20 years and more.
And did you know about powerlifting before seeing? Oh, so what was like, did you not have that understanding per se? Like you said, you wanted to be the strongest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's obviously more of a powerlifting endeavor. But was weightlifting just like that's much more attractive.
I think the Olympics and weightlifting seemed more real. It seemed more like this is the authentic, like if you're a weightlifter, you're an Olympic weightlifter, that's like the strongest a human can be.
Right.
I knew of powerlifting, but there was also no, like, powerlifting was way smaller, was really small and much weirder to me. Like that's a thing. Like obviously, like I always, the one thing I always liked about powerlifting when I was young was like everyone looks like they lift. They have muscle. You know?
Yeah. And there was no classic division, right? There was just like a grip, wasn't it?
Yeah, powerlifting was fucking wild back then. That's like, if you think like when I started lifting was, you know, late 90s, and you think about like the early 2000s in powerlifting, the only resources for powerlifting education was like West Side Barbell.
Yeah, right.
Louis Simmons articles where he'd put his phone number at the end of the article, which was kind of cool, right? It's a different community.
That's where Gary Vee got it from, probably.
Oh yeah. And like, you know, it was like articles that were just like West Side was so bizarre and so confusing sounding. And like everybody would write about it and talk about it and be like, well, that's not really West Side, or you don't know what West Side is. Like, oh, it's like, you know, it's transmogrification of the, you know, the radial nerve syndrome. And you're like, what? It's like, oh, we use band tension. Like everything was so confusing and weird that like, well, this guy must be a genius.
He must know something did the other stuff.
He says it's just math and physics. He's obviously someone who knows that is really smart, right?
Kind of like the Bulgarian system, but for powerlifting,
right?
Especially on the internet, it's like, but it's not really West Side. True West Side. You have to be injured and trained under Louis.
Yeah, you've got to be there, right? The Bulgarian thing was the same. They would say like, you know, there was a Finnish girl who did it with who did the Bulgarian system when they came there, and it was Lundahl, I think was her name, but she would talk about the same things. Like you just hear this bullshit where it's like, oh, you have to, you like keep doing it and going through, and you'll have adaptation.
Yeah,
you'll get adaptation. For it. It's like, what does that mean? Like it's not a thing you're defining. Like, and you never do. Like you never get to this thing that people are talking about.
Yeah, it's just the magical day you wake up and your snatch goes up by 20.
Yeah, and like, oh, now I've my now.
Although you did say when you started training with that group of lifters, you PR'd your power snatch by like 15 kilos.
Yeah, but that was totally an environment, right? Like I don't remember what it was, but I think my power snatch was 115 kilos.
Okay.
And one day I watched, the first day ever in person, I saw a guy, Nikolai, snatch 185.
Right.
He did like 70 muscle snatch, 70, 100, 120, 150, 175, 185, something like that.
Yeah.
And it was like, he was all energized because I was there.
Yeah.
And like they hadn't had anyone new, right? So all this energy, everyone's going crazy. And you're like, oh shit, like 185 can be snatched. Like,
yeah.
That's a squat weight.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're just like, I guess this isn't that heavy. And you're just so fired up. And you've got Abajev there, and you've got all these guys, and
full of excitement.
And like, so yeah, you just like go crazy. I never hit it again after that. It was just like this.
Oh, just one that.
Yeah. But yeah, it was just like a totally wild kind of environment would produce that kind of stuff.
Right. That's wild.
And you feel that instantly when you go, let's say, on vacation into a new gym.
Yeah.
Like it's a different energy.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can see for myself, like we can go to a CrossFit box.
Yeah.
And obviously there's like, well, obviously, generally speaking, there's no great weightlifters there, right? But it's just obvious. So many.
It's lost about 9 of them.
But it's just so many people actually weightlifting that it's like, it's a different energy.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times here in our local club, I don't know, like I train alone or I train with like some power lifters or like one with other weightlifter
people you're very used to.
Also, yeah, with the same group of people, and it just kind of, it kind of loses that energy when you walk into the gym.
Yeah, it's not a system. It's a great method, like to go in and get a bunch of energy and go to a new place and like, if you're gonna have a really
very effusion, but it's
if you're gonna have a good, really heavy training day, it's a great idea to like go somewhere new so the energy is high and do well there and make the most of it. But like, you just can't rely on that, and that's what Glenn was doing for a long time. Like even Dave, like, you know, Max Out Friday, like was every fucking week.
Still around to this day.
Yeah, people still do it. And it's like, it's kind of more of a meme now, but like, it was like, that's just not the thing that drives progress. Like, lifting heavier weights isn't the thing that makes you stronger. You get stronger, then you lift heavier weights, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So they brought Abajeo out because he wanted to make the Olympics. How'd that go?
It didn't. That didn't happen. Yes, that was a wild sort of time. But he wasn't in shape. His shoulder was all messed up. His wrist was messed up. He couldn't train. And then ultimately, the series of events that led up to him not getting there was comical for sure. But yeah, that's a long story.
Like pre-training videos though.
Yeah, Dave got fat. There was a fat Dave moment. He even usually say that.
I've seen one picture.
Yeah, he was huge and he was very, very soft.
Yeah. I even remember him telling about the moment he decided to lose some weight.
Yeah,
it was because I think some girls at the bar wouldn't believe him that he's a weightlifter.
Yeah, or they're an athlete, right?
Yeah, athlete of any kind.
It's the Naruto syndrome.
It's called. Yeah, Naruto syndrome. Yeah.
Okay, so that was the calisthenics stuff that lasted for a few years.
Yeah, I was there for a few years. Then we opened a gym. Joanne and I opened a gym. We had a bunch of clients. I was driving around the Bay Area, all over.
The same gym you have now? Same location?
Yeah.
Okay.
It'd be the equivalent of if you lived in Ljubljana and you had to drive down to the coast and then drive up to Bled, right? Do that trip 2 or 3 times a week.
Okay.
And then back you just a circle. I was just driving all over the Bay Area coaching people. And then so we opened a gym, which is this tiny little space. What did we say? It was 68 square meters.
Yeah,
yeah. And then started getting athletes coming in there. And it was a lot of mostly CrossFitters and recreational people that wanted to do it. I was doing powerlifting at the time. I was training with Jesse Burdick and the Mark Bell crew sometimes. And then I eventually started working with Boris Sheko and just training on my own again.
Right.
And that was pretty awesome back then. That was a wild time for powerlifting too.
Yeah, that's when everything was kind of exploding on internet as well. Yeah. That was the times of the T Nation articles and the Elite FTS, right?
Yeah, I did a 705 squat at a meet, and it was raw. They had wraps, but the guy who wrapped my knee, Jesse wrapped my knees, but they were so loose.
Yeah.
It was the weirdest thing. I was I'm supposed to help. And they were so thick that you couldn't get them tight.
Right.
It's oh, these are stronger because they're thicker. Yeah. It was just and it was okay. So I did this.
Just more stuff behind it.
Yeah. And it was kind of okay, whatever. But then shortly after that, Dan Green started squatting high sevens with sleeves. And then everybody just everybody came out of the woodwork.
Yeah. It's usually like that. One guy comes out, does something people think is impossible, and then lots of people fall out.
I think it was kind of Stan efforting the first one to do huge raw lifts.
Yeah.
Suspectly executed lifts, but yeah, that was crazy. There was just so many people getting into the sport but it was at the time that was all there was.
Right.
It was Mark Bell's having a meet. So we'll just go do that meet.
Yeah.
And then the USAPL was in existence, obviously, but there was way more an East Coast and South thing. It was very little of it in California.
Okay.
So, it was kind of whatever, we'll just do these. And I never took it.
You always do what's around.
Yeah. I never took it serious enough to pursue it. I wish I had gone and tried to do a USAPL Nationals or these other things, but it just didn't make sense to because I always saw it as this is the thing I can do because I can't do what I wanted.
Right. So that was, you got into powerlifting due to the wrist injury.
Yeah.
Which was so bad
I couldn't snatch.
You still can't really try.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So how did that, I think you're most well known for the stuff you put out during the Juggernaut days.
Probably.
So how did that kind of go about?
Yes. I mean, Chad would always be at meets. Right. So he was always you'd see him there. And then he was funny because I would know him from powerlifting meets, but then he'd go to weightlifting meets to push, Juggernaut stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we would be the only ones he'd know. So we'd chat with each other and hang out.
Right.
And he had actually worked with a friend of mine, a guy I lived with, this guy named James Smith.
Okay.
Who would be probably known very little by most people, but he had a screen name on Elite FTS called The Thinker. And he was very smart. He was a brilliant guy. And I lived with him for a few years, or maybe for a year or something, somewhere in the middle of all this.
Right.
So we had this mutual acquaintance.
Mm-hmm.
But then, at some point, our gym was kind of getting to this point where everything was just I was in the gym all day, every day, trying to coach. And you take on every client that comes in, and like you just can't build a business.
You see, it's a real you hit the ceiling soon.
Yeah, you hit the ceiling, and then you're stuck in a place where you can't expand beyond that. And Chad had just started this gym in SoCal, which is 6.5 hour drive from us.
Okay,
where he had kind of gotten screwed by his friend, who didn't come through with some stuff, and so he needed someone to run it. He was gonna shut it down. He wanted to shut it down. And in hindsight, he probably should have shut it down. But I came down there, and we started working together, and that was like the beginning of it was a great time. It was like 2016.
Yeah,
and
that was the gym I have in my mind. The
probably
one.
Yeah, the huge one. Yeah, so
right.
And
that was crazy. Those were
a lot of
awesome times.
Yeah, a lot of really good things converged at one time. Like Southern California had a hugely popular lifting community. It was like everybody was doing powerlifting or weightlifting, and there's a lot of people in SoCal. You had people moving from success in YouTube to fitness, and so you had Bart Kwan and Barbell Brigade.
Right,
that was big. In 2016, the USOC shut down the Olympic Training Center for Olympic weightlifting. So a whole slew of Olympic caliber athletes were shuttled to private coaches.
Okay.
And then Instagram started to take off. Fitness started to take off on Instagram. It was really like a perfect storm of a bunch of these factors all coming together. And then Chad and I were putting out a ton of content.
Yeah. And it was better than most of the stuff you could find online at that time.
Yeah.
So
it's still great information.
Yeah.
It's like, I think it set the foundation. I think Chad really set the standard and foundation for what great content, the quality of content that comes out.
Yeah.
Because it could have kept going as the same old shit with West Side.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Chad probably inspired a lot of people to be invested in good information and maybe pursue degrees and then come back and become coaches.
Yeah.
Mike Israetel as well was huge in that, but it was a huge group of people that came off of that and the success that he had.
Yeah, that's what influenced us a lot.
Yeah,
the first program I've ever written was for Nate, and it was off of I think a YouTube series that Chad made, how to write. I think it was a blog guys program.
It was the hypertrophy sign.
Yeah, exactly. He still does a lot of that, but that was first time I've heard that. It was that, and then 3DMJ.
Yeah,
we're also putting out a bunch of nice stuff.
I think a lot of people just kind of copied and piggybacked on that. Yeah, to become which is good because it flooded the community with a lot better knowledge.
Right, and everyone has different things.
So I've got just a question. When did you start critically thinking about the programming stuff of training, having been under so many different training approaches? When was the time that you were okay, that's not working as well as it should. That's not the way to go. That maybe is not the best way either. When were you, okay, let's see what's actually scientifically the best way? Was it start working with Chad or?
No, so
time was it prior to that?
So I read all of the translated Russian textbook stuff that Bud Charniga would translate.
Okay.
The
Medvedev.
Medvedev stuff, all the yearbooks. I was always reading that. I would read every kind of training book I could, even when I was training with my first coach.
Okay.
So I knew it wasn't probably the best way to train.
Yeah, but you also didn't know enough to do it.
Well, but I also knew what's more important is that I believe in what I'm doing and I commit to it. And I saw the value in him as a coach, and
that's very cool.
But so I was always kind of okay, I got to do this stuff. I got to learn. I had read that stuff so many times. The things that really once I started working with Sheko, he was nice in that I could ask him questions, and so I learned a bit more there. And that made a big difference in seeing how that was applied, seeing the application of the systems.
Yeah, that was really useful for me when I was under you.
Yeah,
we had weekly calls, and not only did I see the stuff you were putting out, but I could ask questions on it and apply it to what I was doing with my athletes.
Yeah,
that's really helpful.
The biggest change, though, I think the biggest sort of keystone for me was reading Mike Israetel's book. Chad co-authored it, but the Scientific Principles of Training,
right,
suddenly gives you the foundation to understand all the other books, everything else, because people will write all kinds of books about. You ever seen the book Super Training?
Yeah.
Like it's so useless.
Yeah.
You just like never buy it. It's just not worth it. It sounds cool. And
It's
people
very
love
hard
it.
to read as well.
Yeah, people like to talk about it like it's this amazing thing, but like it's not valuable in the sense that like you're gonna read that book and learn how to coach an athlete.
Right. Yeah. It's not the principles. It's
Yeah.
very-
Yeah, it's details of like this and this,
Yeah.
that, and it's like it's kind of neat, but like that principle book really gave me a foundation to like understand what I was reading when I look at programming and like the lens to say, oh, I understand why this comes out the way it does.
Yeah.
When you read like the Russian text, you're reading statistical information in a lot of cases.
Yeah,
And,
which is useful, but it's very, very black and white. Like it's either this volume or it's not okay.
right.
That was the major difference for me as well. Like that was the scientific principles, like their book. That was the big turning point for me. Like, because I got curious once I started like weightlifting in 2015 to 16. I got curious on why I'm actually doing this and why it's working, right? But like you said, everyone was channeling all the information from a video, but it's like you're telling me to read this book. I open it and I don't have any clue what I'm looking at, you know? Because it's like research. It's very much not easy to understand language.
Yeah.
You know, all these terms that you don't really know about. And so I was kind of like frustrated because it was, what am I looking at? Like I want to learn, but I have no idea of what to base this on. So that along with the YouTube videos from your time at Juggernaut as the foundation.
I think the scientific principles of strength training and Eric Helms's books. The pyramids.
Yeah.
Training pyramid, nutrition pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
That gives you like a really, really good base.
Yeah.
Be able to at least critically think about what you're consuming on top of that.
Yeah. So to answer your question, Nate, it's like a lot of it was like early on, I was always aware of it, but I would say like I became much more aware than the other catalyst that pushed me beyond just getting a better understanding and thinking critically was professionally coaching people. As soon as I opened my gym, it became very obvious that you have to, like, you'll lose clients and you won't have a good business if you don't have success.
Yeah.
And so like, as soon as you start charging people to train them, like you quickly realize that like, you got to do a better job. And like, it's also like your program has to work and it has to be sustainable. So you have to think way more critically about what you're giving somebody because you don't have the excuses of blaming them. Right? Oh, you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah.
Right. It's you. It's probably you. You're just,
So to sum up, it's all because of money.
Yeah. Money is the root of all success.
Right. That's what you always hear. Yeah. Okay, that's very interesting. It's really cool to hear some of the background of that stuff because we just seen it from afar for so long, but now we kind of get a look into it. Where do you see the powerlifting and the weightlifting like landscape going in the future?
That's an interesting question. So I think the weightlifting landscape is funny because like it still has this like big overhang of the Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
If the Olympics are gone, what happens to weightlifting?
Yeah.
Like we assume that most countries that have a state-sponsored program will die.
Yeah.
The real thing is that Western European countries will lose. They'll just kill the programs right away because they're completely funded by the IOC.
Yeah. So like, even to explain that a bit further, like weightlifting in a lot of countries that are really successful is not like, especially for the powerlifters listening, it's very different. It's actually government funded and there's a lot of money if you are going to the Olympics, if you get a medal, whereas in powerlifting, it's completely different.
Yeah.
So with weightlifting falling off the Olympics, all that money is gone, meaning no Chinese, no Kazakhstan, no Iran, none of that.
Yeah. So I think that would happen. I don't know if that's going to happen. My sense is that we're not going to be kicked out of the Olympics, that will remain.
Right.
I think it'll probably change in the future. Obviously today was like the day they were, Brian Oliver released that whole thing about, the IOC or the IWF looking to like change the rules. And so like, I think weightlifting will mutate a little bit. It always has. We did a podcast years, maybe 6 months ago, on the history of weightlifting. And like, it was wild. Like, like if you imagine from like the early 1900s to 1972, there was 3 lifts.
Yeah.
You could have done a 20-year weightlifting career in the sport and it was always 3 lifts for you.
Imagine in powerlifting just getting rid of like the bench press.
Yeah. Well, powerlifting also went through weird mutations at the beginning. Like I was telling you guys, like, talking to old school powerlifters that had done it like back in the 60s, like they said that like they used to do shit where like you'd start the squat at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So you get into a power rack and the bar was set at your depth and you just try to stand up from there. And just like odd lifts. The curl was kind of integrated to it initially. And just like it started from this weird collection of lifts and to what it is. So I think weightlifting will be interesting to see what happens. I hope that it becomes more friendly to the like media side of things and becomes much more of a sport that's a spectator sport.
Right.
I think it's kind of been occluded from that because there's just not good people knowing how to make it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the whole idea. Like also with the recent category changes, right? They got rid of a lot of categories, was for this whole purpose of shortening it up. It gets easier to
feel like powerlifting and weightlifting for people not in the sport, it's still very hard to watch. Like it's not interesting.
Yeah, it's not. But powerlifting doesn't have that pressure on it, to be so interesting because it's not in the Olympics.
Yeah, but it's trying
not so towards it is, but there's not so much money to lose there.
But there is to gain.
There is to gain, but that's different motivation.
Yeah, I think powerlifting will never be in the Olympics. That's a dream they need to give up. It's pointless too. They don't need it.
Yeah,
I think weightlifting and powerlifting are inherently as exciting as you make them. I think every sport is fundamentally excruciatingly boring.
Yeah,
right. If you think about it, like what makes golf exciting? Like it's not watching somebody swing a golf club
or watching Tiger and doing what he's doing, the way he's approaching it, or like it's exciting when someone is incredibly dominant.
Yeah, it's the people, right? And so the more that those governing bodies can focus on the people. I mean, look at social media. That's the thing that's driving most of the success of both of these sports,
right?
Because you follow somebody you enjoy.
Yeah.
Weightlifting is kind of suffering right now because there's no superstars, right? Lasha is the one for sure, but he's on his way out, and like
he's also not posting on Instagram. And
he's also not doing the big numbers. I mean, he's winning, but like he's not doing where's a 500 total or
right. Yeah, and I think like when you try to make it interesting for people who are not in the sport, it's tough because you don't have somebody going head to head in the moment.
Yeah,
like you do an attempt, and like when you put in an attempt selection, like you kind of know where people are gonna play, so you're only interested in, let's say, top 3, maybe top 5.
Yeah,
but you're just not gonna be interested by the bottom 10 or 15 people.
Yeah, right.
And even let's say it's the sports usually in the Olympics are a bit more boring. Maybe it's not like playing soccer, basketball, like and even if you got like track and field, like you still got people like in the moment competing one against each other. Whereas this, he's gonna take an attempt, and even like in track and field, you might know they're gonna be top 3, but are they gonna be battling second? You're gonna be just more relatable as well.
Like expenses are like much more stretched out across
and especially having so many categories, having so many superstars or whatever, you're just gonna be there for that one person you're liking, or maybe the battle between the two giants or whatever.
What you said made a lot of sense. Like it is the media, it's the lack of superstars, it's the lack of personality, I think, because there's no like you look at racing. Racing is like a really good example, right? You have pre and post game interviews. There's a lot of personality. You get to know your favorite, your least favorite. Like you know all these drivers, right? You don't know anyone of the weightlifting side, right? You know only the flashy ones. So that's either because their demeanor is flashy, like let's say, I don't know, like Ilya is a good example, right? He was really like a showman, right? Training like a showman, competing like a showman. Or you get someone like Lasha that's more stoic, more calm, but lifts these incredible weights.
Yeah, I think maybe what in powerlifting King of the Lifts is doing, like post-meet interviews and stuff like that, is going the right direction. So, but I think maybe it should. I think with time, I think it should just go more into including that in the meet game itself. So it's right after the meet, you're going to interview live on the stream or on the TV. So it's not you now have to go to Spotify, now I have to watch it there on YouTube, whatever.
Yeah. Right. One of the things too I've learned having done the commentary now for weightlifting with Weightlifting House is that so like a lot of athletes are not super interesting.
Okay.
because they're athletes. They're not like
with TV personality.
The coaches are extraordinary. They're like, they're totally batshit crazy in a lot of cases.
Right.
They're just unique people, right? To be like a weightlifting or powerlifting coach.
Yeah.
And so like part of the process is about finding the personalities and then creating the excitement around people, right? So it's not so much about like showing the grueling training of X, Y, and Z athlete, but showing like how excited the people around them are to see them do well. But again, it's like, if you look at like the UFC, like the UFC was weird and it was very strange. Obviously, like when it first started, it was just this bizarre thing.
Yeah.
They did so well in creating this interest around the people in it.
Yeah.
And then you start to like catch on and like, okay, this guy's going to do this and that. You might not even ever have fought one day in your life, but you can get behind it and it's exciting.
Yeah.
And it's not even the fight that's exciting. It's that you beat this guy and you want him to get his face smashed in, you know, and then like he's doing well and you're like more angry.
Right.
Like there's so
Watch even more.
Yeah. It's like everything. We were watching F1 the other day, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the same thing. Like you could watch it and have no idea the rules.
Right.
But the commentary is what drives most sports. And I didn't realize that as much until I had done it.
Yeah.
And like actually start to watch other competitions and listen to the commentary. And you realize like, so for those people that don't know, like the Matthias Steiner 2008 gold medal.
Yeah.
If you watch that completely silent, it's just kind of like, oh man, that guy's way happy he won. He like cries.
All right.
If you watch it with a good commentary, the British commentary, you're like, this is the most incredible event in sporting history, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just a guy doing a clean and jerk.
Yeah.
It means because they can give you the backstory,
Right.
get your emotions involved. Yeah, that's the way that any of these sports are going to have to grow.
That's very true. And also what I think is pretty a significant difference between the sports is obviously we know social media is huge right now. It's getting even more huge with like every year. And I think there's a lot of very big influencer type personalities in powerlifting, and like more and more it's really ingrained into the sport because it's also quite a bit younger, I'd say.
Yeah.
And younger people are getting more and more into it. And there's just not as much of that in weightlifting.
Yeah.
What do you see? Do you see powerlifting getting? I'm not even sure what it is right now in comparison, but do you see powerlifting taking off more than weightlifting in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think powerlifting is probably already bigger than weightlifting by the number of people that do like, you know, the number of people that actually compete in squat, bench, and deadlift. In like the USAPL is smaller than USA weightlifting by membership count.
Okay,
but the number of people that are doing powerlifting in some form is probably quite bigger.
Yeah.
If you include CrossFit, then weightlifting is probably still bigger, right? Because the people that snatch a clean jerk, many people are doing that.
Yeah.
But I would say that powerlifting will probably surpass the other, you know, weightlifting for sure because it's just so accessible, and it's like a means to an end, but can also be the means in and of itself. Like you can do it or the end in and of itself. You can do it for the, you know, aesthetic qualities.
Yeah.
Like, you know, who doesn't want to like be more jacked? And,
Exactly.
You know, powerlifting is a great way to do that.
Yeah.
It's so easy to learn. There's no barrier to entry, basically.
Yeah.
You know, as long as you can do the movements, which is pretty much most everyone.
Yeah.
Then you can benefit. So I think it will get way bigger.
What I was thinking, like, and this, I don't know if this makes sense, but it kind of popped into my mind, like when I was watching it, like looking at powerlifting and the way it's going, is that maybe getting thrown out of the Olympics wasn't such a bad thing to happen for weightlifting, because sure, in the initial drop will be huge, but like you said, athletes aren't really interesting, like generally speaking, right? And I think that's, if you watch, let's say, I don't think that's true for every nation.
Sure.
Like you see, I don't know, Russia, you see Korea, let's say, these real superstars, you know, real great teams with government-run programs. They're more like soldiers than athletes per se, right? So you just come to the meet, you do your thing, you listen to your coach, you stand up, you sit down, you lift, you go. But you see, let's say Great Britain is a great example, right? It's less support, you know, it's more on the lifter to be engaged, you know, to get the funds, to get the sponsorships, to get itself out there, so you actually get a chance to compete, so you actually get a chance to train, and then from that you get more personalities. And I feel like that's why powerlifting has taken off so much, because there's so many of these personalities. Because you don't get superstars that are built from a system that way. The only superstars that exist with the lack of a system are the ones that are really, really passionate, and really involved in the sport because they're so crazy about it. Because like, if you're in a system, right, you do it because you get paid, you do it to survive. Like, especially in the old days, right? It's just some guy, like, all right, you can live a great life, you can get medals, you can get recognition, or you can work in a factory for nothing.
Yeah.
You know, so people that work a job to basically make meets end, right? But still are so crazy about lifting that they want to do it. I feel like those are the people that the sport is really built upon.
Yeah, I think for sure that's the case. It definitely was the case more so a few years back, decades back. The hope is that I think these sports, in order to survive and to grow really big, have to be as commercial as they can get. Like, they have to generate money in like tangential ways.
Yeah, like
CrossFit, like through like sponsorships and like excitement, and like people have to recognize interesting aspects of these things that they inherently want to watch, so that they, you know, get an ad for Coke or something.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to, so you mentioned commentating. That's a lot of what you do right now in collaboration with Weightlifting House.
Yeah.
You're doing great things, just like we talked about. We need good media companies around the sports of weightlifting and powerlifting if we want to grow it and actually get it interesting for the masses. So commenting, you're pretty much doing that on every Worlds and Europeans?
Yeah, we were gonna do the Continental Championships and the Worlds, and then we skipped Asians this year and the Grand Prix, just because they were not really worth attending. Like, as far as the financial.
It's very hard. Yeah. You have to buy the rights, and then also
you have to buy the rights. Hard to sell it. It's like, it's a tough business because like those guys are buying the rights like weeks before, so they have no time to promote it, and like it just becomes a challenge. So we stuck to Euros and Worlds this year.
Okay. And then your biggest project right now is the weightlifting AI app, which is also very interesting because it's something the weightlifting world hasn't seen before. Maybe you can talk briefly about just what that is and how it's different.
Yeah. So I mean, like, having spent so much time over the years, like reading and trying to learn more about training and like how to actually program, you just come up with more and more questions as you go.
Yeah.
And so one interest I had was to like, how can we find better ways to do things? As a coach, you do it manually, you know, day to day with people. The goal of the project is basically to create a system that we can apply powerful tools to, like machine learning and artificial intelligence, to make training programs that are really, really good for people, that individualize themselves to a person, but that in the end, hopefully teach me something new. So if I can learn something about what makes a training program better for one person or another, or that these people respond better to this kind of training program or these kind of variables or these kind of parameters, then I can become a better coach. And I, you know, more of like, that's probably my fantasy is at this level, get to that point.
Because the app's going to have way more data than you could ever have, right?
Yeah. And it's a great fit because there's huge amounts of data that can be collected from a training session.
Yeah.
You have, you know, all the sets and reps and exercises, and then you have all this feedback stuff.
Right.
You can use, you know, computer vision techniques to implement pretty simple testing. So we'll probably implement in like Act 2.0 that's going to come out later this year. We'll implement computer vision as a technique to detect like bar velocity or to detect like vertical jump testing.
Right.
So we can implement some simple jump tests. There's a bunch of different types of jump tests you can do, and we can use those to grade the effectiveness of a training block. So all you need for machine learning is basically an input and an output and a way to rate if that output is good or not.
Okay.
And so what you do is basically you build a training block with a desired goal, like, you know, increase in strength speed. And then you have a test that you can implement that actually grades against that. So you run this training block, Matisse goes through it, you know, he improves his power snatch by 5 kilos. And then we do this test at the end of that, and we run this through. It's, oh, well, that's lower than the average for people that are, are 1.5 meters tall, and don't have a lot of hair on their head, so that's low. So they would be graded as lower.
Right.
And then, there's some other training block run with somebody else, and it's more effective. It's the same demographic.
What would be like the vision for it? What do you envision ideally in a few years? How would you like it to be? So we can get a kind of an idea. Let's say I need a weightlifting program. I don't have a coach. I just want to test this out. I sign up. What do I do, and what does it give me?
Yes, I mean, the initial intake in a few years would be very different than it is now, but the initial intake is asking you for a little bit of demographic information, height, age, weight, maybe some best lifts. And then, pre-computer vision, we would take that information and basically run it through our algorithms that will determine, like, okay, this is how you should train based on some intelligence that was pre-built. That pre-built intelligence is basically just like, snatches and clean and jerks. Like, this is a weightlifting program.
Yeah, of course.
Right. Then as you train and you give feedback as to your lifts, your daily training, we can build models that will better suit the training to you. So if your power snatch is weak, or you're missing lots of snatches at certain intensities, or whatever it is, right? We can use that and basically optimize the system for you with machine learning. So we know what a good training block is, and at the end of your training block, if it's rated poorly or it's rated high, then we can make modifications, and then the system just optimizes towards the outcome.
So every future block is more and more optimized for the lifter.
Yeah, and then additionally to that, like, the intelligence that we start with is essentially built around the idea of, like, we need to be able to track, like, not just like what are the variables that improve performance. We kind of know these fundamentally from research that's been done, but how do we track things like what's the internal stress of training? And then we can model that out, like, what's a typical response to this kind of training load? And then we can model it against your response to that training load and get a more of a individualized profile. You can think of like a force velocity profile.
Yeah.
We would also have a similar profile of what is the slope of fatigue that accumulates, or the exertion, like something
this, like volume intensity.
Right. So like if you're the kind of guy who does 5 triples at 80%, and by triple number 3, you're way more fatigued. You're rating those much worse than Matit's.
Yeah.
Then we know that your stress, levels are, or you don't tolerate that as well. Right. And then we use that information because we know a bunch of things about you to help model this for other people that are similar to you. So the programs get better as more people do them.
Okay. Do you envision that getting out of only weightlifting, like in sports, powerlifting?
The goal is to build this as a universal coaching platform. So weightlifting is like the passion first, and weightlifting is probably the hardest version of this.
Yeah. Why do we get weightlifting? The rest is easy.
The rest is, it's probably simpler. It's easy, but
yeah.
It's like the goal is to make a platform so coaches can use this to basically get, like, I could have 10 benchmark tests to evaluate somebody. When I was coaching, it was always, I'm coaching now, but like when I coach, it's always frustrating to not be able to like objectively say that qualitative things are getting better.
Right.
So like if Matit's is snatching, but he hasn't made like any PRs significantly, or for whatever reason, like, is he getting faster? Is he getting stronger? Is he more powerful than he was?
Yeah.
Without just constantly throwing the same test at him, which is, can you lift more weight on the bar?
Yeah.
We need to have a machine that we can implement benchmark and tests with, that you can implement in training easily, that aren't invasive,
right?
But allow us to gather good data. So you can say, like, well, what is like an individualized RPE scale? Right.
Yeah, we should be able to like that kind of manual sometimes, but it'd be really cool to do it.
Yeah, Nate showed me, like, you guys do more than most coaches, where you might have multiple types of RPE tables based on somebody's rating relative to what the typical is.
Yeah,
but the goal will be able to do that in a way that's very easy, so you can give it to every athlete, so everybody gets the same level of quality training programs, and a coach can come in who's not necessarily super experienced and be delivering good program at the beginning, or have the tools to do so. Right now, all the platforms that exist are just kind of very glorified messaging systems.
Yeah.
Right. Some of them give you like pre-made templates, but That's not coaching. That's just, this is the goal is like, here's tools you can implement your tests and do this with.
And it's awesome timing as well with all the progress in AI, machine learning, and everything.
Yeah.
That's going to be really cool to see.
It's cool to be around those guys, the guys I have working for me, and to like see how fast, like you think like, it's funny, you think some things move quickly, but like the AI community and like the developers in AI, that's super open source.
Yeah.
So everybody builds things off of models that are open source. I mean, Meta just released like a whole bunch of new models that were like wildly powerful tools that are open source. And like, like you can build stuff on top of these things that are like just crazy.
And that's like the advantage of like where you're from, the Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Is like you're around that stuff and there is just an insane amount of talent working on those things all the time.
Yeah, it's different than in Slovenia for sure.
Yeah, here like
there's people everywhere there that are like, do this or that with some huge tech company.
Yeah.
And they're all it's a cool community too because they're very enthusiastic, right? These people really enjoy what they do and they're passionate and like,
because it's a huge thing, right? It's a great shift in our time.
Yeah. It's also neat too because you have just people that are like willing to try an interesting project.
Yeah.
Like this is a very niche thing and kind of funky, but like, oh, that's like, it sounds like a cool idea. Like you're trying to do this thing, cobble together these 5 things together to make a thing, product.
Here, people are much more like stuck in their ways.
Yeah.
Not everyone, but a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of hoping that once stuff you figure out in America comes to Europe, we don't get excluded from Central Europe, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll release it everywhere but Slovenia.
Right. That happens. Wait till
Keep this place pure.
That's like, we still don't have Instagram music,
Instagram music?
But that's because of the laws.
Copyright, yeah.
Right, okay.
We have to have a really wild disclaimer, or whatever it's called, terms and condition for Europe. It's collecting data on people is very different.
It's not even just Europe. It's like when you go to any other country, there is Instagram music, just like this. For instance, like I can't imagine. I mean, I can't think of a country where it's not available either. Yeah, we get it in Europe and everywhere we travel.
Yeah,
just not Slovenia.
Yeah, just not Slovenia.
Maybe that's not such a bad thing. I mean,
maybe it's by design.
Cool.
Yeah, right. Okay, I think we should kind of start. We've been going for quite some time. We have some rapid fire questions for you.
Yeah.
So let's do that, okay? What's your favorite lift?
My favorite lift to do or to watch?
You can do both.
Both? It's probably my favorite lift to watch is the clean and jerk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's competitions that are won and lost.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm going to make it.
Yeah.
Yeah. To do, my favorite lift to do was the front squat.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're sick.
Yeah. I was good at it.
Yeah, that's unpopular opinion to ever be spoken here. Do you enjoy coaching more or competing?
I enjoy coaching more.
Okay.
Yeah. Coaching is a lot of fun because you get more of the rush as a coach than you do as an athlete.
Yeah.
Every lift is, and it's also you get to see your work.
Right. Thing. And you get it much more often.
Yeah.
Whereas an athlete, you have to really build up for a long time.
Yeah, you get 5 athletes in a weekend.
Right. What makes a champion athlete?
Your parents. No. Just the training. I mean, great. It's a combination of multiple things. Great coaching, great training, great genetics.
Right.
Great. I mean, it's all willpower too.
Okay. Do you see most of the people you that find a lot of success in lifting have similar personality traits as well?
No. There are a lot of very different types of person.
Maybe I know you've been around lots of potential, like generates potential in people who are just generally strong. Do you see like a common theme of people not reaching that potential?
Oh yeah. I would say the cliche of super talented people not reaching their potential is true.
Right.
Like extremely talented people I've seen that just didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And then you see the opposite. People that have like very little talent, or maybe on the surface, but had the right mentality would go super far.
Okay.
Yeah, like John. Smash him.
Yeah, I think it was interesting, like a wild animal.
Yeah, I think it was interesting when you were talking about the environment part where you just PR'd and never hit it again afterwards. Yeah. I think that's so huge. And often people just don't. I mean, many people just never get to experience the environment where you're really just hyped up and just get to get the adrenaline pumping.
Yeah, it's because it's a special feeling.
Yeah.
Okay, what makes a good coach?
I think what makes a good coach is somebody who has the right mixture of self-doubt in what they're doing.
Okay.
And a combination of that with like a little bit of like needing to prove people wrong, like needing to beat people.
A little bit of ego.
Yeah, you got enough of ego, but enough self-doubt at the same time that you become like driven to do better, but always think there's something better you can do.
Right. Okay.
And like AK-47 helps.
Yeah, I think and a Doberman.
Favorite competition you've ever coached at?
Man, that's a tough one. You know, I say a lot of times my favorite was coaching one of my athletes to win the Pan Ams, which is definitely up there. It's kind of a combination of that and coaching my wife to break the all-time world record, right? Powerlifting. Right. That was just really special because it was like the first thing we did. Like, it was like totally wild time and like things were just so new to us. And I was like, shit, we just did that.
Yeah. That must be amazing.
Yeah.
And the last one, all time, let's go weightlifting first. All-time favorite weightlifting athlete
that I've worked with, or that I
just
now all-time favorite weightlifting athlete. It is probably going to be Naeem.
Naeem. Okay.
Yeah.
What about in powerlifting?
I would say it was it's a tie. Probably Ed Cohen, or yeah. I mean, that's a tough one. Ed Cohen's probably the one.
Okay, that's interesting because I don't think I've ever seen a competition of Ed Cohen.
Yeah,
I mean, we're too young.
It'd be so old. I mean, I would say like because a lot of it was like you know, I mean, know Eddie, so it's like the guy kind of adds to it.
Yeah.
But there's some wild like there was Andrei Belyaev years ago was just an amazing lifter to watch.
Yeah.
Like, is a kind of lifter you watch that, like, you get sucked into, like, you watch that and it makes you want to do it.
Right.
And that's a unique...
Those lifters grow the sport.
Yeah.
Because there's a select few.
Yeah. I mean, you know, probably one of the most fun lifters that I would say that, like, one of the most underrated but, like, awesome strength athletes is Misha. Right. Tokayev. Like, he just was so, like, charismatic and was so good at so many things.
Yeah.
And he was really awesome to meet. Like,
as well, he was in Ljubljana.
Yeah, and like we talked, he knew I was injured, and he was like, you know, pulled me aside, and he was like, you know, like I know this.
I'm gonna take your wife.
Yeah. But he was like, I know you got hurt, and like the same thing happened to me. That like when I missed the Olympics, but like you should be proud of all the things you did before that. Like no one takes that from you, which I thought was cool because like. You know
what? He doesn't have to do that.
You have to say that, yeah. He knew about the 0 to 600 squat, the 0 to 270 squat I did.
Oh, yeah.
He knew that I had done it before him, so.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I got one up on him.
What was your favorite as a spectator? What was the best weightlifting and best powerlifting competition to you?
Or a session?
Session? Yeah. I didn't get to see it, but the 2014 Worlds in Kazakhstan, Ilya coming back after missing his second twin injury, like is just electric. Yeah, Steiner also, but that was it. And then in powerlifting's tough because the meets aren't quite as exciting, I would say.
Yeah, I think we're getting to the more exciting.
Yeah, it's kind of happening more now, but like one of the ones that stands out is kind of watching Dan Green come on the scene, like probably the backyard meet of the century. Right, one of those old school ones where it was just like wild. The warm-up room there was insane. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. Okay, very cool. So in terms of what you do now, we kind of went over it. Where can people find you? What things do you want to drive them to?
Yeah, if you are interested in remote coaching, you can contact us through teamaita.com or you can, message me on Instagram. If you're interested in the app, we're pushing a huge update. Hopefully this week, and my developers are always telling me there's another thing that's broken, but but that should come out this week, which is going to be awesome. So they're going to put a bunch of different like program focuses you can choose. So now you have the ability to sort of like piece together or build a longer training cycle that's like, focus on your technique, then have competition prep.
Nice.
Some bodybuilding type programming with weightlifting and some squat only programming.
Nice.
So yeah, weightlifting.ai, that's the place to check out that. And then, if you have any questions or want to consult or something, you can always reach out.
Right. Awesome. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
First international guest, hopefully first of many.
Yeah.
If you like this podcast, thank you if you stuck around for this long. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe. We put it also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, so you can follow us there. Rate and reviews go a long way. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, Phoenix_training_systems. And that's it from us for today. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you next time.